And we're live. Hello there and welcome back. I'm Bill Patton, the author of The Art of Coaching High School Tennis. And with me is
Dave Smith, the author of High School Coaching Mastery, among others.
All right, very good. And so today's topic is going to be on-court coaching. And the funny thing is, what we're going to do, we're going to start with how to avoid that. So the setup for on-court coaching is this idea that one of your greatest days that you will ever have as a coach is when your team is performing so well that you just sit in your lawn chair and watch and clap, right?
Yep.
And maybe on a changeover, you just go over and you go, hey, I just wanted to say hi because we haven't talked during this match at all. I just wanted to let you know that I'm still here, you know?
Right.
And then your team just performs amazingly well and you do nothing. And it goes back to the John Wooden quote, if I have to coach during the game, I haven't done my job. All right. Well, anyway, so Dave, take it away from there. And like, what are the things that people need to do so that they can minimize the amount of on-court coaching that they need to do?
Well, I think we have to understand what happens when a coach runs onto the court and tries to instill some sort of learning apparatus, whatever the case may be. Because the problem is a coach that goes onto a court and tries to impart some bit of knowledge, whether it's advice, whether it's, hey, that guy has no backhand, hit it low to his backhand, whatever. Those always backfire almost inevitably in the course of a competitive or tournament match. And the reason for that is you get your players starting to think about what you're telling them instead of being focused on the next point and just being in the moment. And so excuse me, both Bill and I have talked about this. And one of the things that we both agree on is when we were younger, we would try to micromanage our young players into performing in the moment by telling them words of wisdom. And I'm going to have to mute myself. I got a cough. There we go. And so one of the things that I've learned is that if you like Bill just said, John Wooden had it right. If you've done your job as a coach, you don't have to say much, if anything at all. And so one of the things I've made a habit of, especially in the experimentally seeing how this progresses, and with my players, I would simply walk onto the court, and sometimes I would just give them a high five and not say a word. Or sometimes I'd look down at their feet and go, man, your shoes look great, and walk away. Just totally has nothing to do with the match. And it would lightheartedly put them in a different mindset of, coach isn't going to tell me 20 things. He looks confident. He looks calm. And there's a picture in one of my books of me kind of leaned back like this on the bleachers, watching a very highly competitive and important match. And what I was trying to do was convey to my players. In fact, the parents took the picture of it because it was so drastically relaxed that how can you be so relaxed in the heat of the moment? And that was because it was intentional. I wanted my players to see that I had no fear. I believed in them. So that's sort of my belief, is that, and certainly my research and 48 years of coaching shows the fact that the more you tell a player in the heat of battle, the more you take them out of the present mindset. In practice matches, in maybe even challenges, you may want to convey something important so that they learn it right then and there. And I try to minimize that when they're in the tournament setting, because it does take them out of that present focus that I just mentioned.
So, yeah, and I want to piggyback on that and change it over a little bit. But so a lot of the work that is going to get done, if you get your season off to a really good start where you've got some conditioning that you're doing, you're teaching strategy, you're worked on their strokes enough that they're ready to play. They might still, have a nagging weakness that they're working on. But by the time you've started playing your league matches, you've already had some preseason matches, they've already played a ton. Then you go into that match and you can just sort of remind them of something that they've already been working on, right? So one of the things you absolutely do not want to do is try to teach them something brand new during their match, right? So like one of my things is especially as we're getting the season started with our serving and returning drills, I emphasize never, ever hitting a serve in the net. For a couple of different reasons. Number one, nobody ever calls it good. Number two, sometimes when you hit a serve a couple of inches out, it's called good. It can be called good. Number three, serves that are long can still be practiced as returns by your partners, by your teammates, all that stuff. So we do that. We establish that our team, we don't hit serves in the net. So then if I'm going to a court and I see in a particular match that one of my people has netted a couple serves, then all I have to do is just remind them, hey, remember all that work that we've put into making sure that serve goes long and not in the net. So it's a simple thing. It doesn't catch them off guard, and the work has already been done, so it's the laying down the groundwork and teaching the lessons well that makes it easier for the players to go forward. And that's one thing that's kind of fun also is to go on a changeover and say, hey, have you noticed how many balls that other kid is hitting in the net on their serve? And then the kid goes, yeah, coach, man, so there's almost some sympathy for how poor the other team is playing. And then I'm like, yeah, but just remember, keep yours nice and deep in that box. And they go, okay. All right. So now, I think we've covered, what to do in order to absolutely, minimize the amount of coaching. But now, if we're going to talk about minimal coaching on changeovers, and I think very few high school teams allow the collegiate style coaching. I'm not a fan of collegiate style in high school. Because part of what we're trying to do is establish the fact that the kids are going to learn to become independent, and it's also interesting because tennis is unique in that you might have 6 or 7 or 4 or 10 matches all going on at the same time, and you are one person, you can't see it all. So the kids have to know. All right. So minimal coaching, what are some of the guidelines there, Dave?
Yeah, let's talk about, if you are going to go onto the court, focus on one very concrete element that if you want them to work on, whether get your first serve in at all costs, spin it in, make sure they hit the ball, make your opponent hit the ball, keep it, don't get too abstract, but also don't get so scientific that your students are trying to understand what you're saying in that moment too. And so I just see these young coaches running onto the court, and I'll add one other thing, which is sort of very subtle. I walk very slowly, almost kind of relaxed, and just I walk very slowly as these other coaches are running past me to their team. And we in Utah, same in California, you can coach on changeovers. And I'll say one thing about coaching on changeovers that I do like, but I agree with Bill 100% in that we do want independent players. But high school level players, especially on the JV level, there's a lot of learning that can take place. And on a JV match, lower level match, if they're playing, that might be the time I may say a little more, because there's so much learning that's taking place in the moment that if you wait till the end of the match, you've forgotten about it. They've forgotten about it. So there's a pro and con to that. Of course, as Bill mentioned, we do want our players, and that's why I say my top level players, I walk very slowly. It's so funny because there's usually a USTA official at state or region, and they've got their little stopwatch out there, and I'm walking. They're like, "You better hurry." I go, "I'm okay," because I'm going to walk out there and say, "Man, your hair looks great. Keep it up," and just keep it that simple. But the concrete elements could be something as simple as, hey, try to be ready before the ball bounces, on the return of serve or any other shot. But just don't labor the advice, because you will see your team lose the next 2 games guaranteed.
Yeah, and I love that point that you're making, that what you bring to it, you will infect your player with. So if you're anxious and you're stressed out, and then you go and you give a stressed out message to your kid, then they're going to take that on. But if you are not, then you're very calm about what you're doing, then you can help them become more calm. There's an interesting mechanism that has been discovered recently and is being understood more and more, and that is that the adolescent mind has trouble with so-called threat detection. So they've got a fully built emergency response system, as if you've worked with teenagers at all, right? But their ability to regulate it is not great. And so if you, the coach, become a threat to them and they see you coming, they're like, oh, I'm playing poorly, and now here comes coach to pile on, right? Then that is not going to work very well. So now a couple of little things that I forget where I learned this, but there was a really good on-court coach, and they said, all right, you should keep it to 3 things. So you should, if you have to say 3 things, keep it to just 3 things. But if you can say just one thing, say just one thing. But what you can do is you can talk a little bit about strategy, one element of strategy, like, hey, you need to keep the ball cross court more. You're going down the line too early in these points, right? Or maintain your intensity. That's probably the most common thing that I've ever said in the last 20 years is maintain your intensity, right? And then, another one is 2 things can keep you, on an even keel, and they are breathing and good thinking. So there's, there's the mental and emotional, there's the tactical, and then there's the physical performance part of it. Now, every once in a while, and one thing you want to try to avoid, especially with your higher level players, is introducing a technical aspect. But like, let's say you have a player who slices their forehand too much, and that drives me nuts when they do that, right? So a quick reminder, hey, let's get under the ball and hit some topspin. I mean, if you have one very specific technical thing that they're working on that they know about, and they just need a reminder, that's okay, but not a brand new, hey, let me show you how to hit a kick serve now that you're down, a break in the second set. That will not happen. That's a very extreme example as well. So, and I'll finish with this. The average attention span for taking in a burst of information is 10 seconds or 42 words. So if you can say so before you get there, you should have formulated what you're going to say, and you want to get it done in 42 words. So, I might go up to them and go up to my player and say, hey, maintain your intensity, right? Make sure you're only coming in on a really short ball, and one other thing, and then boom, done. And then, like a high five or a fist bump through the fence or something, right? Or you can do this. That's it. And that doesn't take very long. and then it's digestible. But if you think you're going to go talk for a minute, no, it's not going to happen. All right, now what? Yeah, you might want to go off mute.
There we go. So one thing that I love that, and the fact I show that old video by Dr. Jim Lair, the 16-second cure video, which is still, even though it was done in like 82 or 83 or something like that, still has huge application today. And the thing that we would do is we would watch that video as a team, and then we would go out and run a practice match, walking through the 4 stages of what Dr. Jim Lair, if you guys don't know it, go pull it up on YouTube. It's still, I make all my players watch it several times. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've never lost a match, because we prepare how we're going to act between points, because that's what the video talks about, is the between point. What do you do? How do you react? How do you go through your rituals? How do you prepare for the next point? How do you put your mind, reset the computer after a long point, et cetera, et cetera. And so we would actually go through those rituals exactly as the program was laid out. And that helped my players know what to do. And like you said, Bill, we can have 8 or 10 matches going on. So even if we're allowed to coach, which we are here in Utah and Southern Cal and even in Arizona now, you can't get to all the matches. So you're not going to really, if you think you're going to have an impact on those 8 matches that are going on right now, you're not, because you can't even get to 7 of them probably. And number 2, the impact you're going to have is probably negative if you're going out there and laying on too many words, too long of a time, giving them too much information, or giving them something that blows their mind. Or like you said, I love the one thing you said, Bill, and that is they have a natural instinct to feel like they're going to be attacked by the coach coming out to talk to them. And you've got to give them trust and make them trust you by the way you go out there over and over, meaning you're going out there and be a positive influence and say, you've got this. You've come from behind so many times. It's the crystal ball mentality. You're going to win this match. And that's all I'm going to say, and walk away. And that way they don't feel like you're coming out there to berate them or make them feel worse than they already do, because there's pressure on these kids, depending on whether it's a state tournament or a region match or even a challenge match. So watch that video and employ a practice, whether you follow that, instructional component, or you make up your own version of what you wanted your players to do. So really good information.
That is so good. And so, I want to touch on something that you kind of implicitly said, is you're developing a relationship with that player, right? And some players are going to they're going to lap up your information. They're going to be like, talk to me, oh, wise guru, right? And then, some of them are going to be like, hey, I hope this is good. I hope this is net. And then some people are like, do I really have to listen to this guy? And then some kids are like, oh no, here he comes. So there's all these different reactions, right? But you have to coach all of them. You have to find a way to win them over. I'll give you an example. I had this freshman kid, and he was coached by a friend of mine, who's an amazing coach, right? And so now this kid's on my team, and I'm just the high school coach, right? Because his private coach is this amazing coach who's coached so many awesome juniors, right? So I'm trying to coach him, and I'm getting some resistance, So I called his house. I called, and I was like, hey, Mr. and Mrs. D, I'm trying to work with your son here, and I'm getting some resistance, And so, I had a little chat with his dad, and then they put the kid on to talk to me, and I'm like, hey, I just want to let you know that when I come to coach you, I'm offering you suggestions. And you actually have a choice whether or not to do what I'm telling you. So you don't have to do what I say. It's probably going to go better if you do.
Well, let me
finish it all. Yeah,
okay, because I got something to add to that.
Okay, perfect. I wanted to go more, but I'll say one more thing, and then we'll kind of ping pong back and forth. All right. So anyway, there was this time we were playing on some funny courts, and because of the layout of the court, I knew it was going to be incredibly advantageous to slice a lot and come to the net a lot, right? So this kid decides he's going to stay at the baseline and grind topspin, which was the worst thing to do on these particular courts, right? So anyway, so the team wins and he loses. And afterwards I go, I told you so, right? I told you so. And I'm like, look, Stefan played the strategy. He won. He played the strategy. He won. He played the strategy. He won. You were the only singles player who didn't win because you didn't play the strategy. I can't help that. You made your choice. You lost. So I'm not mad about it. I'm not trying to humiliate you. I'm just being factual. This is what just happened. But then a funny thing is, in the section championship, this is like the final of 145 teams, right? And a lot of them have Division I prospects on their teams. And he's playing a servant volleyer who's never played before. And he's like, Coach, what should I do? And I gave him just a couple of nuggets, and he came back and won in 3 sets. And I'm like, that's what you want. All right. I'm sorry to belabor that. Go on.
That's excellent. Well, there's 2 things I would love to add to that because it's so true. Well, first one is when we're at the beginning of season or during a rainy day practice where we're indoors, we're in a lyceum or conference room, I do talk a lot about what I'm going to do between game or on changeovers when I talk. And the big thing is you're earning their respect, you're earning their trust, you're earning their belief that you know what you're talking about. And it doesn't matter. I mean, it does help when you've produced championship teams and championship players for sure. There's a level of trust, but there's still a hesitancy until they see it work for them, as your player did there. And I always tell my players that we will work extraordinarily hard in practice, so I don't have to come out and instruct you during your matches. And you may be down love 4 or love 5 even, 1-5 in the third set, and you're going to see the momentum shift. And here's how momentum changes. And we talk about, I talk about momentum shifts in my book. So those of you who have read my books, you know that there's 3 categories of momentum shifts, and your players need to recognize not only when they occur, but how to maintain the momentum shift itself. And so I'll talk about those 3 things that you can share with your players, both in off court, but you can also remind them on court, because I did that twice. And I had a player come from 1-5 in the third to win a match. I had another player down a set and down love 3 in the second, still won the match because of this statement. And that was the momentum shifts are one of 3 type of shots. One is a lucky shot. One is a long rally that it's like the longer the rally, the more you don't want to lose that point. And the third one is a exclamation point put away, meaning you really put an overhead through a net player, you ripped a passing shot, you hit a drop shot winner. Those are momentum shifts if you understand what has to happen after that momentum shift shot. And I tell my players, if there's one shot that's so dang important, to make sure you do everything you can to win that point, as if we shouldn't do that on every point, obviously. But one of them is you have to win that next point, because if you lose the next point after that momentum type of point I just described, you negate the value of that shot. So when your players know how to recognize the momentum shift point and then make sure you win the next point, because it's almost like a 2-point switch. You won a lucky point, probably shouldn't have won it. You made a great shot. A lot of players aren't going to make that. Or you put a ball away with such authority, your opponents are kind of back on their feet, and you let them back in by letting them win the next point. So there's the momentum shift, and that's something you can remind your players of. And like Bill, I had a player who 2 years prior had been down 1-5 in the third set in the region finals at number 2 singles. And in the third set, and none of my players had ever even lost a set the whole season. And here this girl lost a set, which was bad enough, not in my mind, but in her mind, and now down 1-5. And I told her, I reminded her of how momentum shifts work. And I just said, hey, you win a couple points, you win a game, that girl's going to start thinking, hey, I shouldn't lose to this girl. I'm up 1-5, I'm up 5-1. And it happened. My girl came back, never even had a match point against her. She actually won the next 6 straight games. And then plays the girl in the finals of number 1 doubles 2 years later, their senior year. They lose the first set 6-1. They're down love 3. And I reminded, her name was Faith. I said, Faith, do you remember what happened 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And so I said, you win one game here, that girl's going to relive the moment you came back from 1-5 and try harder and harder to not let it happen, which inevitably makes it happen. And sure enough, we came back and won that match as well. So understanding momentum shifts and how to respond to them, part of this whole between point mindset.
Yes. Well, there are times that you must go speak to your player. And there are times you must not. So one of the rules of thumb that I learned from when I was an assistant for a Division II college program, the head coach had this rule that he didn't talk to his players until 5 games had been played, right? So, after 5 games, you could be down 2 breaks, right? Or, but you could be down 2 breaks and it's 4-1, or you could be down 2 breaks and it's 5-love, right? So obviously there's something that the pieces have to be picked up at that point. But if you intervene too early, if you start talking to your player too early, you don't allow them the space to get into the rhythm of it, right? Like I've had lots of players who will get down an early break, and it's just because, they're just a little bit of a slow starter. They tend to be a little nervous early in their match, and then they settle down, they come back. And so there's no reason to overreact. But I'll give 2, quick stories. I had this kid and he was down 5-love in the first set, and the other kid had a bigger forehand and a bigger serve. And it's kind of like, okay, what do we do here? Right. So I go to Peter, hey, look, just stand a little further back. Just try to return more balls and run for everything. Just don't give up. Right. And see if you can eke out a game. Right. Eke out 1 game in the set. Right. So sure enough, he does. So it's 6-1. So the next time I talk to him, I'm like, look, now you have evened the match. He won 1, you won 1. Right now, just take care of your service games, right? Play super high percentage. I want you to make every first serve. I want you to run hard for everything. And then the other kid was surprised that the match had become more difficult. And after winning 6-1, he kind of thought he was going to win, 1-1, right? 1-2, 1-0. But Peter didn't give up. And so that kid served for it at 5-4 and 6-5, and Peter broke both times and then won the second set in a tiebreaker. And now the other kid's thinking, oh man, I have to, why is this match not over? And then Peter wins the third set 6-1 because the kid just imploded. And Peter just started finding other little ways to drive the kid nuts, right? But it all goes back to that moment at 5-love, where you don't give up. You don't give up. You set measurable goals, and you never know what can happen, right? Another one, I had a girl who was up 5-love in the second set in a playoff match, and she's a freshman, and it's a big moment because all eyes are on her, right? And when I went out to coach her, I could tell everybody's like, what is he doing? Why is he going to talk to her at 5-love, right? And the reason is because I've seen kids lose matches from 5-love up, especially when they're younger and in a high pressure situation. So I go up to her and at 5-love and I go, okay, look, she's serving. We expect her to win this game because servers always have the advantage. But if you break her, it's over. But if she wins it, it's not the end of the world. Right. And then just serve your game and you're playing really well. Just keep playing well. Right. It doesn't matter if it's 6-love or 6-1 or 6-2. It doesn't matter. Right. So anyway, because, with teenagers, if they lose that first game, they're kind of like, oh. And if they lose a second game, then they're like, uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Right.
And then they lose that third game and they're like, it's slipping away. And so you just have to get ahead of that a little bit and just be like, hey, she's, all the pressure's off of her now because it's 5-love. She is not expected to win. She's going to loosen up and she's going to play a little bit better.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Whatever. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that my college coach, one of my college coaches, told me, which was rather interesting and a little gamesmanship, but you can do it in a very fair way. And that is when you're playing somebody who's playing really well on the changeover, with all dripping sincerity, just say, man, I can't touch your serve and your forehand looks so good. That's all you have to say, because now you've got them.
I wouldn't do that. I would only do that to a friend of mine. No, I would do that, and I would talk a lot of trash to my friend. But yeah, that's
I mean, if the more you do it sincerely, I mean, if you really are saying that's amazing, and not doing it, not trying to be, not making it obvious, but you are putting the seed in their mind that, oh yeah, I am hitting pretty good. That's the easiest way to take them out of their realm of the zone. So to speak. So the others,
you had me at sincerity. That's okay.
No, I do mean sincerity. No, I'm not saying you're gushing. You're just really just a very simple, man, your forehand looks great today. That's awesome. And that's all you have to say. Anyway, the other story is, and this is an important one, about cockiness versus arrogance. And it plays into this between the points and before a match even. So when I coached in Arizona 29 years ago, I had a pretty solid number one doubles team, but we were playing a team that was now in our region for the first time. It was called Saguaro High School in Arizona. They were out of Scottsdale. And they had a number one doubles team that had won the state title the previous year, their junior year. Huge left-handed kick serve, huge. I mean, two of the best players, really without question. That they were dominant in every way, shape, and form. But I had two really scrappy young players. And the thing that was interesting is, as soon as that cocky, arrogant team, I'll say arrogant team, walked onto the court, as they were walking through the bleachers where both teams were watching, because it was the last match of the day, and it was just these two guys, one of the two guys says, well, this will be another 6-0 6-0 match, loud enough for everyone to hear, including their opponents, which were my kids. And ironically, this was the final, and the Saguaro team had not lost a game. They had won all their matches 6-0 6-0. So they threw out the cocky, arrogant, oh, this will be another 0-0 match. Well, first of all, they win the first set 6-0. They're up 2-love in the second, and their left-hander, their big lefty, is serving. So they're going to go up 3-love. And I had told my players between the sets, I just said, hey, you know what you do? Chip shots back, make them hit the ball. That was it. Just make them hit 2 or 3 extra shots. That's it. We broke that guy's serve, which was devastating to them. We go on and win the match 7-5, 6-3, and we play the same team again at state and beat them 2-2. So you can see how one phrase, because when they articulated the announcement, proclaimment, oh, this will be another 6-0 6-0 match, and they lose a game, their prediction is now failed. It's a false statement. And it's very interesting that they actually took themselves out of the match, much like you had described, Bill, where they just literally pressed, and my kids just kept making them hit ball after ball.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. So be careful with your good players that they don't show arrogance. Cockiness, and to me, is not words. Cockiness is you walk on the court with a head up and mindset of, I'm going to win this match without having to say it.
I want to dig into this a little bit. And so, yes, all of the messaging that you give on changeovers should be respectful of the other team, because you help your player when you help them respect the other team. Because I always say, as long as they have rackets in their hands, they're dangerous. So your job is to make them shake hands with them and make them put the racket back in their bag, right? And come up with the balls, right? So that's a really important messaging. In sports psychology, there was Rainer Martins did a really cutting edge thing in 1970. It totally changed sports psychology forever, because he was able to split out the difference between the anxiety that you feel in your body and your mental anxiety. So they're two different things, actually. And so what he found is that as confidence goes up, performance also goes up, except in the case of overconfidence. So when you become overconfident, like to the point where I don't have to try to win, then you're in danger for sure. So, and it's really interesting because the group of people that did more poorly as they became more confident were police officers. And, in order to be a police officer, you have to be a pretty supremely confident person. But you get overconfident. And now here's an interesting thing that I have found over the years is that generally, very few people struggle with overconfidence. What they really struggle with is a lack of confidence. But each of the teams that I've coached that has improved pretty rapidly and then made a big win that nobody expected, the next match, we almost always had a problem with overconfidence. Like, we just beat this big team. Nobody thought it could happen. And now we have to go in the next match and get ourselves up for it again. But wait a minute, we just beat that upper level team, and now we're going to play a lower level team. So now we don't have to try. So the way that I inoculate my kids against that is with the 4 principles, the 4 goals that we have. Number 1, give 100% effort. And that means regardless of opponent. So we give the best effort for the tough match we might lose, for our rival that's really close to us, and the worst team in the league. Number 2, enjoy the competition, right? And, it's funny, when you are going out there to enjoy things, then it only matters who the opponent is if they're being yucky, if they're not fun people. That's the only time that affects you. Okay. Number 3, show yourself strong and wise. And it is unwise to be overconfident, right? So we're going to be confident, but we're not going to be overconfident, right? Because that could cause us to lose. And then finally, learn from everything. And yes, you can learn from winning, and you can also learn from losing. And I really hate that phrase where people say, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, because it's like, it undermines the fact that you can learn a lot while winning, and you should. And there's only one way to learn to win, and it's by winning. So, anyway, so those are some of the ways that I inoculate my teams against that. And then, because they've heard it so many times, then on a changeover, I will go and I will check in with them. I'm like, are you giving 100%? Right? Are you enjoying this? And then, the player might say, hey, that girl is giving me stink eye, right? So I go, well, don't look at her, because So another thing that happens, I think, on changeovers is you can get into the interpersonal thing in the match. So, like, oh, this girl's my friend, right? Or, this girl's not doing the thing that she needs to do to be a good sport on the court. Or this girl's really mean and she's giving me stink eye or whatever, right? So in that case, it's really interesting because if you look at someone who's actively trying to intimidate you, you let them right in, right? So I tell them, don't open the door. I just don't look at them. Yes, listen to them, right? Glance in their direction to make sure you know where they are, but don't get eye contact with them because that's what they're looking for. They want to find out if they can intimidate you. So keep your shields up.
Well, let me add two things about confidence because this is a very critical thing. If you're going to create a team that is successful year after year, that you've got to do two things. One is confidence is not necessarily taught, it is trained. Meaning you can't just talk to your players and say, hey, let's get confident. Let's pump yourselves up and that kind of thing. I mean, that's part of it, but it's earned seriously and sincerely through strokes that develop confidence. Players executing shots and you telling them that was exactly the way every top player does it. Keep doing it. Now you're instilling confidence rather than trying to fake it, act on it, and that kind of thing. So confidence can be trained, should be trained, and it is then developed through repeated opportunities to gain more confidence. And I will say this, a confident team shows respect. A confident team always will applaud their opponent for a good shot. Should, actually, I won't say it always happens, but definitely should be. And I always train my players. The weakest player, I had a fellow player in high school who I would beat every good number 2 player. I was number 1, never could beat me. And he always never applauded my good shots. It was always his fault. And so he never allowed himself to recognize that his opponent was better than him, which would have made him a better player because it kept pulling him down. And then the respect of having that confidence, showing your opponent's respect, even in losing. And we didn't lose very often. But the fact is, some of our matches, we did have a match that we would lose a individual match, even though our team would win. And, we would applaud our opponents. And in part of Jim Lair's 16-second cure video, he does talk about part of the ritual is looking at your opponent. So I'll kind of counter this a little bit, what Bill was saying. And that is, you look at your opponent with the intent of conveying non-verbally, I will win this point.
Yeah.
And there is something to that as well. But I always train my players, do not get in a verbal barrage of name calling, bad calling. We had a match with Palm Desert, which was a very wealthy school in Southern Cal, when my team of Asian Vietnamese boys, and we were one of the top teams in California, but these kids from Palm Desert came off their very luxurious bus. It wasn't a school bus, and came onto the court with their Fila gear and 14 rackets each and whatnot. And they're looking at my little Vietnamese kids. I mean, I had kids that were barely 5'1" or 5'2", and they were like, God, look at these. And they had some racial undertones to their wording. And of course, we killed them 14-4, as I recall. And to see their arrogance go to the whipped dog visual, where they were walking back to their bus with their tails between their legs, literally just heads down, just like, and my kids did not say a word, even though the other team was very arrogant, had a lot of underlying racial things said to our kids. Our kids kept their mouths shut, performed, annihilated them, and moved on. And so that's something I think it comes from good coaching, as well as good character of your team. Hopefully you have good character and that kind of thing. Sometimes you don't get that lucky, but you can help train that. And that's part of the confidence I like to try to exude in my players. I like the word you said, Bill, inoculate your players with confidence. Like it's a shot.
Yeah, in fact, I want to go. I'm glad you said that because that gives me a chance to go a little deeper on that one. So there are also other interesting opportunities. So now as we go along, we're getting into the more nuanced stuff. So one thing that's tricky about coaching in Southern California is that each player only plays one set against 3 different players. So you might not be able to make it 5 games without talking to your player. So that's where a lot of pre-scouting comes in. So the more information you have about players before you start, the better. What are their strengths and weaknesses? But also in our pre-game ritual, I have my players recite this with me. We say it all together. Today, confidence is my biggest weapon. I will give 100% effort, enjoy the competition, and show myself strong and wise. I will get 65% of my first serves in play, my feet in position for every shot, and continually pressure my opponent. I love a tough match. So that's a lot of coaching that they just gave themselves by saying it with me before the match even started. And then one of my little tricks is that sometimes the rules about when you can coach are a little murky. So if in a warm-up, in the 5-minute warm-up, I notice that there's just some glaring weakness in the opponent, I will check in with my player. I'll run over there really quick, and I'm like, "Do you see that backhand?" Right? I'm like, "Do you know how you're going to attack that thing?" Right? And so it's like, or I might say, "Hey, this player doesn't seem to get out of the way of the ball very well." Or if you can find one thing in the warm up and just go and say a word really quick, as long as the rules don't disallow that, I say go for it. Because in the SoCal format, you better get your information out there quickly. But also you have to be very careful not to overwhelm your player with too much information. It might be in SoCal that in the longer sets, where it's 4-3 and then 5-4 and then 6-5. You've got a little bit more chance to share a few things. So, that's a little tricky. That's one thing I don't like about the Southern California format. But, again, that kind of goes back to the more work you do ahead of time, then the less you have to do moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. That's the coaching between. Sometimes I've walked onto a court and I can tell my player's kind of not focused. I'll actually turn to my player, have him look at me in the eye, and say, "Can you tell me if your opponent is left-handed or right-handed?" And
good.
Sometimes
Yeah.
they've not even paid attention, as even though we've trained it, they sometimes they're not even clued into that very important aspect of who their opponent is and whether
Another good thing you can do to check to see if your kids are listening to you is you can go, "Hey, I want you to lob short and rush the net." And see how long it takes them to go, "Wait a minute, that doesn't sound right."
Right. That's
funny. And then they go, "Wait," and they go like, "What?" I'm like, "Just kidding," But no, I'm glad to know that you were paying attention. Thank you very much. Right.
Right.
In fact, now let's get into some of the kind of the tricky things, because you mentioned like a little gamesmanship thing. But one of the favorite things I learned from Dick Gould is when you go out and you actually have nothing to say, right? And you brought this up earlier. Talk about their shoes or whatever. So at different times in like really high stake matches, all the work has been done. It's getting towards the end. I go out to my player and I'm like, "Hey, I just came over. I have absolutely nothing to add, right? But now here's what we're going to do. You and I are going to look at them on the other thing. We're going to look at them. We're going to nod. And you're going to walk away like I just told you the thing that's going to win the match." And they don't know that nothing happened here, right?
Right.
And that has worked so well, right? But it's not going to work well with a player who's not very accomplished.
Right.
Right. but just walking away from that, I want you to sell it. I want you to walk with the most confident winner walk you can get. Head up, shoulders back. You can't stop me, right? And then oftentimes we see the other player just kind of shrink back. Mm-hmm. The other thing I like to do is go up to my player and we'll look at them and I'm like, you see them? They got nothing. Yeah. That coach has, I can tell you for a fact, that coach has nothing to say to that player. I don't even know what they're doing over there.
Well, that's funny because when I teach my players before a tournament ever happens, I do talk about this whole thing. And I will tell them, watch your opponents after their coach runs out onto the court and tells them 20 things. I said, that's the best thing you could hope for. And enjoy the fact that you're going to have opponents who are just not in the moment. They've been taken out of that moment by their coach, and just smile, almost laugh. I mean, it's sort of like point and laugh. I wouldn't do that, but I mean, it's like, and just like you said, they don't know what you're smiling about. They don't know what you're laughing about. You could have told the funniest, dirtiest joke in the world or whatever, you're just laughing. They don't know. They think they're laughing at them, and so that's a great point, Bill.
So, here's another one, because you're gonna have different personalities and you have to find out where their buttons are. So I'm going to use names on this one because this just happened not too long ago. So I have Evelyn, who's my number one player, and she pretty much hates me, right? And I have Angel, who is also a senior, and she's the number 2 player, and she's decent. She's good. She's good, more coachable. So they come into the doubles as the number 3 seed, and they got to play 2. And I scouted the number 2 team, and I saw that team's really good on the outside. So the one girl's got a really nice backhand, and the other girl's got a really nice forehand. So you get the ball on the outside, and they're just gonna kill you with angles, right? So I was like, all right, everything's gonna be down the middle of the court. We're gonna make them play what they don't like, right? So my girls win that, and now they're in the finals against the number 1 seed. And then I'm like, you know what? And I was like, hey, so then as the match is going on, my girls play the same strategy against the number 1 team, but now they're letting it slip in the second. So I go out to start coaching them. And I know every time I go out there to coach, Evelyn would like to probably plug her ears, right? But then I noticed something. Every time I went out there, she would get annoyed with me, and then she would play better. So they win the finals, and now they're going to CIF, which nobody expected. Nobody expected that, right? So they're going to CIF, and they're playing a team that's rated on UTR a full point higher than them. Nobody expects them to win that one. And I just go out there and I'm like, hey, I have nothing to say, right? And then after the match, Angel comes up to me and she says, did you know that Evelyn gets really annoyed when you do that? I'm like, yeah, right? But have you noticed that when Evelyn's annoyed, she plays a lot better? And then Angel's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. It's the last matches of your senior year. I'm pushing all the buttons because I don't have to deal with the fallout later. So they ended up winning another round against another team that was rated a full UTR higher than them. And, they got into the so-called main draw. And then after that was over, then I bought them a smoothie at the tennis club. I told them, get the biggest one with everything in it that you want, So sometimes some players are like that. And then I'll tell one more and then I'll let you go on. But I had this girl, Monica, really sweet. But Monica said, Coach, the closer you get to my match, the worse I play. I said, okay, Monica, I will only come talk to you if I have something really pertinent that I must say. Otherwise, I will stay as far away from your court as I can. And, she played really well. And I very rarely spoke to her, but she was very honest with me about her feelings about the pressure she felt if I was close. And I wasn't trying to put any pressure on her. So,
well, those are great. I mean, yeah, every coach, if you got a large team like my teams, Bill's teams, we've got 55 personalities with a group of 55 girls on a team, any given team. And if you're a club pro, an academy pro, you're still need to be. I've always said that every club or academy pro should coach high school tennis for 3 or 4 years, just because it's the greatest learning experience you'll ever get that you can translate to your academy or to a club situation. But knowing your players is one thing, and training them to recognize themselves is obviously another component of that. I was going to add one more thing to that. Now I've just lost my train of thought. But the one thing you have to understand, your team will be a product of how you train them, stroke wise, mental, conditioning, strategic, all the elements. And if how many coaches still, there's one team here locally who has a so-called pro as a coach who's really not quite that qualified, but still better than nothing, I guess you could say. How many times we have a high school coach who's the math teacher who played tennis twice.
Yeah.
But I asked a couple of the players on that team that I train, and I said, well, what's your practices like? Well, all we do is play. That's all we do. I said, you don't drill? No. You don't work on specific shots? No, we just play doubles, we play singles, and we play live ball. We play wave, which is to me, it's the lazy coach's way to coach tennis. Just let okay, move up, move down. There's no coaching really. It's sort of the guided discovery way to coach. And to me, it's the worst way, because every team we've ever played that has had that mindset of a coach that says, my kids will self-discover everything.
Oh, right.
Not even close.
Even when I'm doing large group games, we'll stop. I mean, if somebody makes an error that's pretty common to the team, I'm like, I'll stop and teach for 30 seconds. And it's really interesting how much patience high school kids have with each other. Like somebody needs to learn something, and then it's really funny how you teach one kid how to do one thing for 30 seconds, and then other kids start doing it. And then you go, yeah, like that. But, we're getting near the end. And, I wanted to, one of the closing statements I wanted to make. But after we do closing statements, let's just do like one sentence best practices. Okay. So Dr. Bob Love came to Stanford University, and he was speaking in a lecture hall to 150 tennis pros. Right. And so he says, raise your hand if you are a coach. Right. And so everybody raised their hand. Right. And he said, now raise your hand if you have seen your players play 5 matches with you watching in the last month, right? And then very few people raised their hand. And he said, you are the coaches. The rest of you are just tennis teachers. So to underline your point that, high school coaching is actual coaching. But, just teaching a private lesson to somebody and never seeing them play is not at all really coaching at all. All right. So let's ping pong it back and forth. Let's do this. Let's do the 5 best practices of on-court coaching. And then we'll do the 5 worst practices of on-court coaching. And try not to repeat. Okay.
Well, I think we've covered all the positive stuff, so I don't think we. Okay. I think.
Just as way of summary, let's just kind of summarize what we've done. I'll go first. Go first. Keep it simple. 10 seconds or 42 words on a changeover. I'll
say trust your students. If you know what you're doing, trust your students. Don't try to subterfuge their ability by you now saying, well, now I don't trust myself, so now I got to tell you something else.
Okay, number 3. All right, keep it to 3 things or less. So a mental thing, a strategic thing, a their energy thing. Okay, and it's okay if you don't talk about all 3. Okay, number 4.
I would say remind your students that momentum can change at any moment. And that goes for both, whether you're ahead or behind. And that means don't let your opponents back into a match because you fail to recognize how the momentum can change in their favor, but also when you're behind, to know that you can change the momentum in your favor. And the more you learn about that, the more you train your players to recognize that, you'll close out matches the way you should.
Yes. And number 5 is teach the stuff that you want them to know early and often, so that in matches it's just a quick reminder. Because you can't teach it in the thing. All right. Now, the 5 worst practices. What are the 5 things you must not do?
I would say do not rush onto the court and create anxiety in your player.
Okay, good. And do very minimally discuss technique. I mean, if any complicated discussion about how to hit a tennis ball ought to never happen on a changeover. Number 3.
Number 3 is give them something that they can easily recognize that they can do well. Just something simple as, hey, just slice your serve instead of trying to blast your first serve. Because if you can give them something that they recognize paid off, they just regained a whole lot of trust in your knowledge and in themselves.
Number 4, don't make it about you. Make it about them. So listen to what they're saying. Don't just tell. Because Positive Coaching Alliance has this great saying: ask, don't tell. And number 5.
Number 5 would be just avoid taking your players out of the present mindset or the present focus. Anything that they did beforehand, like, you shouldn't have done that backhand three rallies ago where you went down the line. Now you're bringing their mind to the past, and don't get them too far in the future and say, you know what, let's hold serve and then let's break their serve. You're no longer in the present mindset.
Okay, I'm going to confess something now that you said that. And this all came back to me as a flood, right? So in the 90s, I said to this girl who's playing doubles, I was like, Rachel, do you realize that you just hit to the net person like 5 straight times? And she burst into tears. And I'm like, wow, I was so helpful at that moment.
Well, there is learning that takes place if you're, paying attention. But no, it's true. I mean, especially now. Let's talk about a one more variable to close on. Girls are different than boys, and I love the cliche that says girls will care more when they know you care. Boys tend to care more when they know you know more. And there's obviously exceptions to those rules.
Interesting
exceptions, but the real reality is, I've learned that with the girls, they really respond to caring mindset versus telling, technical, getting on them about something and getting tough on them. Boys tend to like you to be tough on them, but there's exceptions to that as well.
Well, it's funny. I kind of want to wrap it up, but now that you said that, I think maybe we should keep going a little bit longer. So
I don't have a lot of time, so let's.
Okay, but so just a couple minutes here. Okay, so can you do 3 more minutes?
Of course.
All right. So it absolutely, you have to communicate that you care more about the person and their short and long-term well-being than you do about today's tennis match. So like when a player tells you that they're hurt in the middle of their match. How you deal with that can have be crucial to the morale of the team moving forward. I told coach I was hurt, and then he was like, suck it up. Right? I mean, that's not the right message. I mean, so I had a kid, tell me that they had a partially torn groin. And I'm like, well, if it's feeling any worse at all, you will stop. You need to stop, because I'm not going to be a part of this, watching you hurt yourself. So don't run for anything super far away. Take it easy. Pay attention to what's happening down there, right? And I mean, if he had lost the match, or if he had retired from the match, I would have been perfectly fine with that. But because he told me we were able to manage it, he was able to come back and win. That's not the point of the story. But then I also meant that moving forward, that became a really big emphasis of my time with him, was making sure he recovered from that during the season. So he didn't have to do any conditioning after that until his groin was, 100%. So that's what I wanted to finish with, is, that especially when it comes to their mental, emotional, and physical health, put that first.
Yeah, and if you ask your player, hey, would you like to come off the court, in a very sincere, compassionate way, if they know they're not that hurt, they'll say, no, I'm good, coach. If they know they're hurt, they're going to come off.
Yeah.
But I always put it on them. There is no shame in coming off the court if you are hurt. And I want you to make a logical, conscious decision. If this is a painful event and could be hurt beyond today, it's not worth it. And that goes a long way for them to feel you're willing to sacrifice the important point of the match with their health. I think that's a key factor. So,
and finally, though, after that happens, I think it's really important to talk with your team about it. Hey, Stefan's hurt, and Stefan's not going to be doing conditioning with us, so it's not a preferential treatment. It's has to do with his overall well-being, right? And I want to let you know that it was courageous of him to let me know that he was hurt. And there have been other times that after somebody comes off, I'm like, hey, somebody came off, and I fully support them. And if I want everybody to know that you should feel free to let me know if things are not well with you. So
good stuff.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for your time. Thanks for
Bill.
Watching, people. Go ahead and like and subscribe, and check out our books, The Art of Coaching High School Tennis and
High School Coaching Mastery. If you're a high school coach, it's a must. Both our books are really complementary to each other too, by the way. So they're going to help you in everything you do, for sure.
Yeah, we do all of our arguing here.
So
all right.
Take care.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.